Welcome to our webinar on electronic forms, workflow, and robotic process automation for Office 365. We still have some people joining, but as usual, we're going to start on time. And the recording and the presentation will be sent out within a couple of days. And so anybody who missed the beginning can certainly go back and watch it. Jim, let's jump in. All right, so my name is David Kruglove. I'm a managing director for ShareSquared. I'm joined by Joe LeBay, who is a robotic process automation expert with KnowledgeLake, and Jim Duncan, who you've heard if you've been joining our webinars, our chief architect at ShareSquared, and he is a SharePoint certified master. We always set an intention for the webinar. We want to clear your listening. We're not here to sell anything. We'd love to engage with you if you see something of interest, but our intention is to teach what we know, and not that we know it all, but we know some things, and to share and not present the answer, but really present what's possible for automating business processes. And I want to emphasize what's possible. We're going to move very quickly through a number of demos on different processes that we've automated here at ShareSquared that entail different technologies, and it's not a training. You're not expected to understand everything we showed at the end of this very fast demonstration, but we are going to have some breakout sessions. We're trying something new, and we'll have a poll, and anybody who wants to be, I shouldn't say breakout sessions, they won't be done today, they'll be scheduled later, but anybody who wants to join a follow-up session will be invited to do that, and the way you signify that is by answering the poll. We want to foster a community of people who want to improve technology systems and their efficacy like we do. We want to answer your questions, and we'll have an extended QA for 15 minutes after the hour. And then, if you don't take action on something, if you've got a business problem, technology problem that you're trying to solve, wherever you're at, if you need more information, or you want to brainstorm, or you have to put an RFP out and you're not sure how to do that, or you're ready to implement something, the way to having something happen in the real world is taking action. So we want to help you with that if we can, but at the end of the day, that's what makes a difference. And of course, we're here to be of service to you. Okay, so we've got a very full agenda. I'm going to try to finish my part by 10 minutes after, and then Jim and I will do the demos together. I'll start with an overview of the differences between workflow and robotic process automation. From now on, I'll just be saying RPA, and then we'll go over the different forms and workflow options you have in Office 365, and some of them will be legacy, but there's some important information about that that just came up, and so I want to make sure you're aware of that. And then we'll also talk about what's new, and then we'll move to the demos with Jim and me co-presenting a status report, document generation application, project change request, and then automated meeting curation. And then we'll turn it over to Joe to cover the RPA definition and benefits, how it integrates with various components from files to systems to desktops and things like that, and the different types of bots, and some common document use cases and demos. And then we'll do the closing, and we'll stick around, as I said, for 15 minutes to continue doing QA. Okay, so we're going to start with a poll, as we often do, and select all that apply. We're trying to get a sense of what people are up to in terms of the use of these different technologies. So I'm going to start the poll now, and I'd ask that you vote quickly so we can keep moving. It's on your screen, and go ahead, and we'll give it about 30 seconds, and then we'll move forward. Okay, people are starting to vote, mostly on two options, none of the above, and Power Apps and Power Automate, and now a few RPA as well. Give it about 10 more seconds. 5, Vote if you're going to vote. Vote in the election. Vote now. Vote now for the election. All right, we're going to close the poll. And here's our results. So, it's nice that we have a bunch of people who have joined to learn about RPA. It's relatively new for me. Joe's an expert, so he's covering that part. Some of the third party forms and workflow we'll talk about. Obviously, Power Apps and Power Automate is top of mind for a lot of us. The built-in SharePoint workflows, pay attention when I do the next slides. There's some information about that that's important if you haven't heard it yet. And then for those of you who haven't gotten started, again, take action, in some form or fashion. There are links throughout the presentation which we'll distribute, and that might be a great starting place for you to get educated about what the options are and how to move forward. And then, of course, you can reach out to ShareSquared if you have additional questions, okay? Okay, let's move on with the presentation. So I wanted to start off by distinguishing the difference between workflow and RPA. And workflow, as it says here, is a sequence of tasks that result in the completion of a process. And just sort of an abstract way of saying that there's some piece of work that has to get done, and there's a whole bunch of tasks, and those have to be orchestrated across the various tasks that make up that process. So this happens, then that happens, and this, and those tasks can be involve systems or people. But workflow is really about that sequence and the orchestration, whereas RPA is about automating individual tasks. And they can be fairly complex, and there could be tasks that are tied together, but it's really more about automating those individual tasks, including ones that can't be automated programmatically. So I used to be a programmer, and I've done a lot of implementations that involved web services and APIs, old school DLLs, things like that. And I could tie those processes together programmatically. What's not so easy is when there's different systems, and part of it is to do a lookup in a browser somewhere to get some information, and then to take that piece of information you found and move it to another system. And so that's where RPA comes in. And when it's combined with artificial intelligence, you can address work activities that require human knowledge or judgment to make a decision. So that's the new frontier, really. And then the overall goal is to cost effectively shift monotonous and low value add data entry activities from information workers to bots. So, save us from doing the dirty work, essentially. So again, workflow is that overall orchestration of tasks, and RPA is taking those data entry activities and things like that and using bots to implement those so that humans don't have to be involved. So these are kind of some of the older options. I don't know if you can see the default list forms. This is when you create a list in SharePoint, you automatically get a form for it, and this is the option where you select that. And if you can see, the options are to use the default SharePoint form. There's also an info path option. So moving to the right, you can use info path. That's still supported in SharePoint Online, but there is limited support. I'm not going to go into the details of that, but as an example, you can't have anything that would violate sort of the multi-tenancy rules within SharePoint Online. So if you had some code behind an info path form that does something that's not permitted in the online environment, that won't work. And then there are some workarounds for things like mobile. So you can follow these links, you'll see a lot more information. And then the third option over to the left is Microsoft Forms, which I wish Microsoft would have called Microsoft Surveys, because that's really what they are. They're for doing surveys. Very cool. It's a great technology, very lightweight. It doesn't require any programming. Really, none of these options require any programming unless you're doing something in the code behind on InfoPath. So this is a bit of the legacy, except for the Microsoft Forms. On the next slide, we'll talk about what you really should be using. So the Microsoft Lists app is new, and if you can see the picture, it's a kind of a glorified list. There are a number of templates, so that event itinerary. So you can take a list in SharePoint and do a whole lot more with it, starting with templates. I believe you can create your own templates and things like that. Power Apps are, and I'm going to read this. So Power Apps are Canvas apps. So Power Apps are a specialized type of an application that you can create in Visual Studio and in Power Apps, in the Power Apps Designer. tool, and they can be created from a sample app, a template, from Excel, from a common data service entities, and a SharePoint list. And I'll distinguish those a little bit from what are called adaptive cards. So Power Apps are not as flexible. Adaptive cards are completely platform agnostic. We call them UI snippets. They are implemented with JSON, if you're familiar with that. And they are highly flexible, can be moved between different platforms. Power Apps are a little more sticky than that, though pretty flexible as well, as long as you have a browser. So those are the new options for forms. That's fine, Jim. You're great. I paused. And then for workflow, here again, this is the old options. This is what I said. If you're one of the persons who said you're using the built-in SharePoint workflows, 39% of the audience that voted said that. You should pay attention here. Those built-in workflows that were originated in SharePoint 2010, but were supported in Office 365, retired or will be retired on November 1st. And that means you've got to move away from them. The 2013 workflows are still supported. And so 2010 were built-in workflows listed above, those document publishing and approval, collect feedback and signatures, and 3-state. Those are the original 2010 ones. In 2013, SharePoint Designer is what we used to create workflows, and those workflows, with some caveats, are still supported but not recommended. And if you are using if you're anybody in that 39% who said you're using these, you can run this modernization scanner and get the workflow usage report, and there's a snapshot of that to the right, and you can see where you need to replace those workflows. So you don't have a lot of time. You've got a few weeks, and it is a bit of an issue, but if you need help, let us know. Otherwise, follow these links, and I think the report will give you good information. Okay, now the more modern workflows, obviously Power Automate, and we've got a picture of that. That's going to be the focus of our demos. So I won't spend too much time on that. I will say there are hundreds of connectors, and this is just a snapshot of some of the samples, but if you follow that link, you'll see that you can very easily, without code, connect to hundreds of different systems and pull in data and things like that. And then there are the third-party solutions. We've been an Nintex reseller for a long time. We have not been active recently. We are more active now with PlumSale workflow, as it's much less expensive, and we find it does a very good job. So our approach is always, use Power Automate first, and if that doesn't do what you want, or you're finding that that's more difficult to work with, then move to a third-party platform. And again, PlumSale is in the hundreds of dollars per year, whereas Nintex is in the tens of thousands. So that's why we've sort of headed that direction. Okay, it's demo time. We're going to do these 3 demos on the slide. The bullet points below each demo are the different technologies that we're using for the demo. So Power Automate, PlumSale Documents for the document generation, SharePoint lists, and so forth. With that, Jim, I'm going to make you a presenter, and we'll jump in and we'll, I'm sorry, you are the presenter. Go ahead and show your screen.
Thanks, David. All right, so we're going to start with status report document generation. And while I get all my tabs situated for that, David, you want to talk a little bit about how we used to do it?
Yeah.
I can provide details about how long it took and how tedious it was, but you want to talk about the mechanics for a bit?
Yeah, so we're a consulting shop. We implement solutions for customers. Jim's got this active projects screen up, and those are all project portals for projects we're actively working on. And for each of those projects, we do a weekly status report. So you can imagine, if we've got 20 projects going at a time, we have to generate these status reports. And we used to copy the prior week's status report, which was a Word document, go into Project Online, which is how we manage projects, copy the tasks that we completed in the prior period and paste those into Word, and then get the ones that are planned for the next period, period being a week in our case, and paste those in. And so it's a very manual process, and It just, it's one of those things that was just a begging for a workflow. So Jim, go ahead and jump into the workflow.
Awesome. Thank you, David. So we have this flow created here, and it is titled Generate and Deliver WSRs, Weekly Status Report. So it does a few things. We'll discover those together along the way, but ultimately it collects all the data that we used to manually collect by reviewing email threads, asking other people on the team what they were doing for, what they got done last week and what they plan to do this week, collecting all the data, and then putting that data into a document template, which used to be copy last week's report and then update it for this week. So this flow does that for us. And if we look at the actual details of the flow, it's set up to trigger on a recurring basis. So once per week at 4:30 in the afternoon on Monday, so that means it just happened yesterday, this flow in Power Automate runs. We currently have test mode turned off, which is a good thing. We do actually want our status reports. We don't want to just see what would happen if they were generated, but not generate them. If we did want to test it, we could just change this to true, and the rest of the flow would look at that and see that. So if we're not in test mode, we're going to load up a template document. So we're going to get this template Word document from a SharePoint site. So rather than copying the last known instance of a weekly status report for project A and updating it, we start from the same template every week, and it looks like this. It's a Word document, and embedded in the Word document are these special little codes. So this one is saying we want this week's start date, and we want to format it with the full name of the month, the day, and the year. And then we want to insert the project logo over here, and the project name, and the start date, and the end date, and the project health, and we'll see where all this data comes from here in a minute. But down here we have repeating tables. So we want the category or milestone of the task that was worked on, the name of the task that was worked on, who did the work, and any notes that they provided related to that work last week, and what they've already said they're going to be doing this week. This document gets reviewed each Tuesday in our weekly Scrum call for each project. That's what the template looks like, and that's what's being loaded in this step here. If we are in test mode, then we don't load that document. So we calculate some variables here. So we calculate the start date, the end date based on today, knowing it's going to run on Monday. That means the previous period started the Sunday before a week. So anyway, we calculate the start date and end dates, and then this is where we reach out to Project Server via the SharePoint Project Server API, the project data endpoint, with some filtering turned on so that we get all of our active projects. So that's this list here. There are a lot of projects that we have over here in Project Online, but these are the active ones for which we want to generate a weekly status report. So we pull those into the flow, and then for each one of those, we basically reach out to the project portal site. That's a custom property we have in Project Online, the URL of the project site, and we grab its logo. And then we reach out to a SharePoint list where we've got all our notes and time entries for the week. So this SharePoint list is built from our timesheets in Project Online. I happen to be looking at a view of my notes. So for this week, these are things that I plan to do. Some of them might have been done by now because we're already on the 6th or the 5th, 6th. But this SharePoint list is what's queried by the flow over here to get the entries from last week. We want one data set for that. And then again, the same list, but to get the entries for this week. It's just easier for us in the flow to have two separate collections than to try to split them ourselves. We could say, get all the entries from last week and this, and then split them in our flow, but we just found this to be easier. And then we do a little bit of magic here. And this is an expression that takes all of the data that we got up above, our list of active projects, the current one that we're iterating on, the current one that we're looking at, the logo, the time entries from last week and this week, and it puts them all together in this crazy expression and gets it ready to be in the format that is needed by the document generation. So if we're not in test mode, then we're going to archive last week's status report. So one of the things that we do is the current status report for the week is always called status report.docx. That way we can just give a person a link to that and they'll go right to whatever the current status report is. So that means we need to archive last week's status report. So we do that. We take care of that with a few steps here. We just check to see if there was one. It might be a brand new project, so we don't need to archive a document that's not there. But then we actually generate our Word document, and we're taking the file content from our template file, which is this. And basically all of these little placeholders are being replaced with the data for the current project that we're on. Remember, we're in an iteration right now. So we're going to take the file contents of the template and the outputs of the template data and generate a document from it using Plum Sale documents. Nice, inexpensive little set of custom actions that can be used in Power Automate. We didn't find a way to generate tabular data when we started to build this, so we reached out and found one, and it's a great one. So now that we've merged the data together, we create the new status report. We set the values for its the period start date. It's the weekly status report itself as a content type has some custom metadata, a custom content type with fields. So we fill those out, and then we move it from the project online site. So we're temporarily generating the documents in PWA, Project Web App, and then moving them into the project portal after we've succeeded in creating the document and setting all of its metadata and archiving the last week's report if we needed to. We don't want to put a broken status report in the project portal, so that's why we do this last. And it's almost last, but I'll show you what it looks like. It looks like this. Here's the status report from a few weeks ago
Jim,
for a specific, yeah.
Beautiful job, and we got to move on to the next one. But so just kind of bring this one to. You're doing great, but we, as usual, we've jam-packed the session.
Okay. So at the very end, if we did generate some documents, meaning we're not in test mode, then we're going to inform the delivery team via a chat and a channel in Teams. This could easily be notification via email. We could notify all the customers that the status report for their project is ready to come and be viewed. We just haven't taken it quite that far yet. Maybe we'll do one of those things in the deep dive. We'll extend this a little bit if it's interesting to people. And that one's done. We have a note from the curator, our special bot account.
Let's move to the next one, Jim, and I'll give the setup for it. Beautiful job, though. We keep Jim on his toes. He said, can we just do two? I said, no, we got to do three demos. So the next one is a project change request. And so I hope you're starting to appreciate the power of Power Automate. So you saw a lot of things happening, reaching out, getting data from Project Online, putting a notification in Teams, and there's a whole bunch going on, document generation. So even though we spent about 10 minutes on that, again, we're going to have follow-up sessions. So if you want to join one of those, we're going to go much deeper into how that stuff is done on about an hour-long session per workflow. So for this one, this is our project change request, very normal thing to do in a project, hopefully not too normal for us. We usually estimate pretty carefully, so we don't have many of these, but we were doing these manually as well. So this was copy a Word document, affix a signature to it, a graphical signature, generate a PDF, email it to the customer, not hear back for weeks, that kind of thing. So we decided to automate this as a workflow. And Jim, we're going to try to do this one maybe 5 minutes and catch up if we can. So do your fast version, okay?
All right. So this is a SharePoint site collection, part of an Office 365 group created just for the management of project change requests. This is the home page of the SharePoint for the SharePoint team site that came with the group. We've added a nice button here that takes us to our custom new form, and we've got our list of change requests down here in various statuses. Our next step is going to be to apply some custom formatting to this view to make it a little easier to work with. But here we're using a custom form. This is also from PlumSail. This is PlumSail Forms, and it allows you to create either a public-facing web form and collect its data, or customize the list forms for a SharePoint list or document library, and that's what we've done here. So to create a new project change request, I click that new button, I select which project it's for from our term set, or I can just start typing. I specify who the stakeholder is. This is the individual from the customer organization that's going to receive the request to approve or reject the change request. I choose the project type, the hourly rate, I type in a description, and this is what's cool about using a custom form solution. In a SharePoint list, without a separate SharePoint list for the line items for the services we're going to provide and the materials that we're going to provide, I can still store tabular data in my SharePoint list item without having to do a lookup to another list. And it's the PlumSail Forms technology that's making that available to us in this particular instance. I'm going to jump over to a change request that I have already started, and I have sent it off for internal approval. So if we are really good at demos, if we are really prepared, then David is ready to approve that change request right now, so we can see what happens when he does. But we might just pretend that all that happened. So that's our change request now. It's no longer a document. If someone wants a document out of this process, it's relatively easy for them to manually generate a PDF just by clicking this button here, or we could add a step to our flow that generated a PDF at the end for us once it was fully approved. And speaking of the flow, this is that one. It's called PCRMS approval, Project Change Request Management System approval. There might be other flows happening in the system someday. This is just the approval one. It makes a few connections like the other one does, but this is the key. So our trigger here, this is very important if you're doing this kind of work, and we'll get into it deeper on the follow-up session. But this trigger fires whenever an item in that SharePoint list is added to the list or changed, and our flow is going to make changes to the item. That means our flow is going to trigger itself to run again. So we have to think about that as we're building the flow, and you might see some of that as we click through quickly. We're going to check to see if the title and change number matches our prescribed format. That's one of the ways that we tell if it's a new item versus an existing item. If it already matches, then we check to see if it's ready to submit for internal review. If not, we update it. We set the title and the change number the way we want it to be. We also set the status to this is a new request. The user changes the status to well, they set request internal review to true, and if that is true and the status is not yet submitted, then we start an internal approval. We set the request to the status to pending review, and then we send an approval and wait for it to complete. And the approval goes to whoever we've decided to put in here as the value of the approver's item in this list called PCR settings. So this is another pattern you could follow. Don't hard code your values like this within the body of the flow, because then you have to find the person that made the flow to change it. Whereas if I wanted to change who the approvers are for this whole process, I can just change the SharePoint list item. Okay, that's another good pattern to follow. We wait for the approval internally. If it was approved, then we let the person that submitted the change order know via chat in Teams that it was approved, and then we send it on to the stakeholder. And this is another instance of document generation, but we're not generating a document starting from Word, we're generating a document starting from HTML. And it's similar in how you have to decorate your HTML. It's got the double braces, but it's a slightly different kind of code to write, if you will. If you want to call this code, then yeah, there's code in your template. We generate the request. We want all the information that the stakeholder needs to make a decision to be in that email along with the button to approve it or reject it in the email, so that they don't have to go to Power Apps or Power Automate and sign in and find their approvals and find that one approval and then click approve. So that's why we're building this HTML template and using it for the outgoing email. And of course, we're checking to see if it was approved or not, and we're keeping people informed on the whole process, managing the status of the change order as it continues on, even handling cases where it's rejected.
Well done. You're close on time.
What
So
I
we
missed?
want to make sure. No, you did great. You're doing great. So let's move to the last one, and we're going to move with velocity on that. You probably can't click into everything. We'll save that for the follow-up session, because we want to get Joe on here with
Okay.
RPA piece. So all right. So the last demo that Jim is going to do is meeting curation. And so we do most of our project delivery remotely, especially now, but we have been doing that since 2005. And so we use Microsoft Teams, and we do our Scrum calls and our working sessions and our trainings and everything. And then we record them using Stream or Teams. And then we upload those recordings to the project portal for the project. And so that if somebody missed the meeting, they can go back and review it, or if there's a decision we want to check, or we sometimes even listen to them to make sure we appropriately gathered requirements and things like that. So that also takes some work. Now, there are some changes that are just coming about with where recordings are stored. They were stored in Stream. That's going to change to OneDrive or SharePoint. So this workflow will be fully automated at some point in time. Right now, there is some user interaction, and that could be automated using RPA. We haven't done that yet, but Jim, let's run through this one about as quick as you can, because we got to get on to Joe. So go ahead and show it.
Interrupt me if I miss anything. So the problem we're trying to solve is that in Microsoft Stream, where the recording for a meeting in Microsoft Teams is automatically saved, does not allow access by external users with a capital E, or guests as they're also called. So that means our customers, the people that attended the meeting, cannot review the recording if we only leave it in Microsoft Stream. So that's the problem we're trying to solve. That problem's going away soon, which is going to be awesome. I think we're going to opt in next week. But in the meantime, this is what we do. When the recording completes in Stream and it's fully processed and it's ready to be curated, an email is sent to the person that started the recording. That person has a rule. That person is me, that person is other members of whoever records a meeting, has a rule in Outlook that says any email that comes in that includes your meeting recording is here, ! In the subject line, forward it to the curator. And the curator is that special bot account that we have that we use to create flows and that kind of stuff. So it has a mailbox. It is an actual user account. It has a license. But the email gets forwarded to the curator, which triggers a flow. It's called meeting curation request. So it's using approval to offer curation to the person that recorded the meeting. And what it does is, I've got to go quick here. So when a new email arrives with that particular subject line, we're going to do some things. We're going to parse some text out of the email. We're basically going to read the email in this flow. And then we're going to get a list of active projects from Project Online. And for each one of them, we're going to add them to the options that a user can select in an approval. So typically in an approval, the options for approval are approve, reject, and sometimes reassign if that's enabled. We're changing those options. We're replacing approve and reject with project 1, project 2, project 3, all of our active projects, all the projects that we're having meetings for. And we're sending that approval to the person that organized the meeting, the one that sent us in the email, and then we're waiting for a response. That offer to curate looks like, if I can't find one, okay, here we go. Let me just bring this up onto the screen. They look kind of like this. So here's this new new recording is ready to be curated. Please select the project. And there are some options here for me to choose from. A much larger list of projects if I go past the adaptive card and into the actual approval, but shouldn't have to do that. So, oops, minimized the wrong window. So we send that approval to the person that forwarded us the email about the meeting recording and wait for their response. And they can respond either in the adaptive card or in the approval that we sent. Once we get a response, we check to make sure that they didn't select don't curate the meeting. Maybe it's an internal meeting and everybody that needs to see it can see it in stream because they're internal users and not guests. But if they didn't say don't curate the meeting, then we're going to get their comments, we're going to get some information about their user's profile, and then we're going to send a request to the curator. So
Jim,
this flow.
Let's break right there. And if you want to see the rest of the detail for this, we're going to go back to the presentation and we'll do the poll. And so if you want to see the detail about any of the 3 demos that we just did, we're going to do a 1-hour session. It'll be smaller, probably on Microsoft Teams. So if you could go back to the presentation, please, Jim. Great job, by the way. I'm the one who jam packs these, and next year we're going to do a new series, and I've committed to not doing that so much. All right, so we're going to do a poll. This is about joining a follow-up session for any or all of the demos that we just did, so we can get into more detail, and you'll be allowed to ask questions and things like that. We'll do it on Microsoft Teams, so different format altogether. Something new we're trying. So if you do want to participate, I'm launching the poll. Vote, let us know, and then we'll follow up with you. Anybody who says, yeah, I want to participate, we'll do that. And if you didn't do the poll and you see this later, then by all means just email us, and we can add you to the session. We haven't scheduled them yet, but we'll try to do it in a way that's convenient. This is we have one more webinar this year, later this month, because we moved this one, so we're doing 2 this month, and then we'll take November and December off. And we'll be retooling in the new year. Our plan is to use Teams Live, use our cameras like everyone's doing, so you can see what Jim and me really look like. Jim and I will be doing a session on how we actually build the applications from inception to launch for intranets and collaboration and records management. So, okay, so I'm going to wrap up the poll here so we can keep moving and get on to Joe. You've got about 5 seconds. If you haven't voted, vote now. If you want to be included in an email to join the follow-up session for any of these workflows. 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm not going to show this poll because this is just for our internal use. So the poll is closed, and we're going to turn the mic over to Joe, and then Joe will start with some presentation and then his demos. Go ahead, Joe.
Great. Well, thank you very much, David, and thank you everybody for participating in today's session. Again, my name is Joe LeBay with KnowledgeLake, and as David said, I'm going to be speaking about RPA. More specifically, what is RPA? What are the benefits of employing it? What it can integrate, and what are the most common RPA processing patterns with regard to document management? Contrary to the results of our poll, which was kind of interesting, RPA has garnered a tremendous amount of attention recently. And with all that attention has come a little bit of confusion. So I thought it would be best to start off with a definition as a level set as to what I believe RPA is, considering I've been doing RPA, and this might come as a surprise, for the last 17 years. So, and that will play into our definition here a bit. But let me read you the definition, and then we'll circle back and do a little bit of a deeper dive. RPA, robotic process automation, is a collection of technologies, application remote controlling techniques, and methodologies that enable software robots or bots to perform tasks that are normally performed by human operators. And those tasks tend to be tasks that work with structured data, tasks that are deterministic, and that are repetitive, and we do frequently. So let's take a step back. Collection of technologies. RPA is not a new technology. It is not a singular technology. In fact, some of the technologies that are used in RPA have been available in the Windows operating system for over 20 years. So the question you might be asking yourself is, what's all the noise about? Why has it become mainstream? And the biggest reason, at least that I've seen, is that there's been a mind shift brought about by the plummeting cost of compute power. So virtual computing, elastic computing has now brought us to the point where it is very cost effective to teach a software robot how to do these monotonous, repetitive tasks that we now have very expensive people doing, and they're able to do that at scale. Application remote controlling techniques. The main reason why my team and I created one of the first RPA products back in 2003 was to be able to get data in and out of black box applications that offered no other programmatic means to get data in and out. And we did that by translating the application's user interface, which is the only interface an application is guaranteed to have, for the purposes of performing systems integration. So if you're thinking about doing RPA and you're evaluating a project, if you are not remote controlling another piece of software somewhere in your automation, chances are you might not be using the best tool for the job. Now, there are very good reasons why, even though there are programmatic means to do integrations, that people will still use RPA, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But if you're not remote controlling an application, there may be a better way to do it. And then methodologies. Methodologies, the idea of designing and building software that integrates things that were not built to communicate, requires a very specific type of methodology and plan that governs how you select the appropriate candidate processes, how you design the automations, how you build them, how you deploy them, and most importantly, how you manage them in production. So the methodology that you employ for RPA, I would argue, is just as important, if not more so, than the tooling that you select, because it's that methodology that allows you to scale your RPA program. And then what are the processes? I touched on them before. Structured processes. Think transactional data, things like invoices, insurance claims, medical records, high volume business transactions that are the lifeblood of an organization, things that are very form oriented, great candidates for RPA. Processes that are deterministic. They need to have a beginning and they need to have an end. They can get very complicated throughout the process. However, they need to have a clear beginning and a clear ending because the bots follow a rule set. They don't really rely on intuition like humans do for certain things. So if the process is not deterministic and it cannot be governed by a very clear set of rules, probably not a good RPA project. And then of course, repetition and frequency. So the more you do things, the more repetitive it is, the greater the return on investment for your RPA project. Bottom line is RPA is a universal adapter that bridges the gaps between your documents, your data, and your applications. Next slide, Jim. Next slide, there we go. So why do we care? What are the benefits of RPA? Well, first of all, there is a significant reduction in cost. Whether you measure it on a transaction basis or a per hour basis, bots are just less expensive than human operators, assuming you exceed some baseline number of transactions to cost justify the initial spend of implementing RPA. But once you have that kind of volume going, the comparisons they're not even fair comparisons because the bots are so less expensive. Improved accuracy. There's no doubt that the bots type exactly what they're told to do. They don't make typos, they don't transpose characters. They do exactly what they're told to do. And so that's why it's important that you tell them the right thing to do, because they will do exactly what you tell them to do. Increased throughput, bots type real fast. They don't get tired, they don't get bored. They are able to push data in as quickly as the underlying applications will accept it. And I'll give you an example that I think is a great testimonial of how efficient these bots can be. If you're familiar with the Paychecks protection program that had started several months ago, I was involved with an institution that was implementing RPA to be able to do that. And in the second phase of the PPP program sponsored by the Small Business Administration, they actually banned the use of bots. And they did it for two reasons. The first was the bots were pushing data into the user interfaces of their application more quickly than they could actually handle. So it was causing outages and inconsistent performance across the network. But the second reason I find particularly of interest, and that is they banned it because the SBA felt that RPA using organizations, mostly banks, had an unfair competitive advantage over those who were not employing RPA. So in order to level the playing field, they actually had to hobble various banks' ability to use RPA. And I can't really think of any better testimonial than to the power of this technology, other than the fact that sometimes it works so well that you have to throttle it back. Enhanced security. Most security breaches are human-based, so the fewer people that are handling your sensitive documents and data, the less chance you're going to have for a human-based breach, which is good. I touched on return on investment before. We typically see a return on investment for an RPA project anywhere in the 2 to 6 month range, depending upon what you're doing, how many bots you're employing, et cetera, et cetera. But we're not talking about years with regard to ROI. We're talking about short-term, quick wins. It's also easier to manage than traditional integrations for the end user. If you think about an API-based integration, quite often what will happen is the developers will develop for the happy path where everything works well. And on the occasion when things don't work well, they don't really spend a whole lot of time of giving you great telemetry as to figuring out where the problem is. By definition, RPA does give you really good telemetry. Most of the tools speak what we call the language of the user. So by doing things like recording transactions, playing them back and syncing them with logs, allows an end user with no special training to be able to watch these videos and pretty quickly diagnose where the problem is. They may not be able to fix it, but they can isolate where the problem is pretty quickly. And as you all know, diagnosing a problem is where the bulk of the time is spent when you're trying to remediate an issue. Standardization and compliance. When you have a process done by a bunch of human beings, you're going to have a lot of variation in your process. So when you implement RPA, you have to teach the bot one way to do it. You can't teach it the way Joe does and the way David does and the way Jim does. So you're forced to standardize and document the process, which makes it more compliant, makes it easier to track, and hopefully improve over time. And then finally, the last benefit, which is my favorite, is that the human operators who used to type this information in are now liberated to perform higher value added functions for the organization and customers. There's an RPA player in the space that talks about RPA taking the robot out of the human, and I think that's a great description of this benefit of RPA. Next slide, please. So what can a bot integrate? This is generally where the eyebrows cock a bit with skepticism, and I don't blame you because I'm going to tell you that an RPA bot can pretty much integrate anything. It can integrate any desktop application, Windows app, browser app, legacy application that's running in an emulator under Windows, even DOS applications. Believe it or not, we've got some of those. Websites, files of all types, flat files, rich data format like Word, Excel, PDF, access to databases, web services through REST or SOAP-based interfaces, and proprietary APIs. The bottom line is, if a programmer can do it, or a user can do it, a bot can do it. And the wisdom that comes with experience is knowing where to apply it and where not to apply it. Because of this incredible breadth of capabilities, RPA can quickly become that hammer that makes every integration project look like a nail. So with a little bit of experience, you figure out where it works best and where it's not appropriate. Next slide, please. So what kind of bots exist in the RPA world? Well, there are two, attended bots and unattended, and then there's something called a hybrid bot, which is a combination of the two. And I'm going to show you demos of all of these. Attended bots are bots that run on the user's desktop, where the automations are triggered by the user. So it's totally run under the user's direction and executes on the user's desktop. They tend to be short-lived transactions and as I said, under the direction of the user. Unattended bots are kind of the opposite of that. They do not run on the user's desktop. They usually run on one or more dedicated physical machines or virtual machines, and they handle longer running transactions, more batch-oriented transactions, and they're usually kicked off by some other mechanized means. So things like a timer, run this job at midnight every night, or when a file is placed in a particular watch folder, execute, or maybe a call from a different, from an external application via web service call or something like that, because these bots can be published as web services. And then a hybrid bot is a combination of the two, where the process starts on the user's desktop via an attended bot so that the user can set what we call a context. Maybe I want to process 10 invoices, but I don't have the processing done on my computer. I actually pass that off to one or more waiting unattended bots that do the work and only get me involved if there's an issue. Next slide, please. So having done RPA for the last 17 years, you can imagine that we have seen a number of common patterns that have emerged, especially with regard to document management. And one of the things that I've observed is about 80% of all the RPA processes that I've been involved with either originate or terminate with a document. So we're talking about pretty document-centric processes here that are good candidates for RPA. And out of those 80%, these are the 5 most common patterns that we've seen. Document acquisition. Most document management platforms have the ability to drive a scanner or poll an email account or watch a watch folder for the presence of documents. But documents flow into the organization a whole bunch of other ways, like downloading them from a website or an FTP site, or maybe they're fed by an EDI translator or some other mechanism. So one of the common patterns that we see is that RPA is used as a document acquisition method where the document management packages kind of leave off out of the box. Second is contextual linking of line of business systems to documents, something we call the jump to pattern. I'm looking at a record in my line of business system, let's say a customer, and now I want to see all the documents related to that customer, and those documents reside in my document management system. Well, is there the way that I can link those two together so that with the click of a button, I could see all the related documents? And I'm going to show you again examples of all of these. That's the jump to pattern. Indexing, or what we call quick copy, is a similar concept, except it has to do with not retrieving, but indexing a document. So if I scan in a document and I'm not using an advanced capture capability like machine learning or anything like that for the purposes of auto categorization and data extraction, I have to supply the metadata manually. Well, quite often that metadata already exists in a line of business system record. So rather than copying and paste it or rekeying it, can I just go to that record in the line of business system, click a button, and have the metadata copied over? That's the quick copy pattern. Then there's the forms assembly and forms extraction, or document assembly and forms extraction pattern, really 2 sides of the same coin. Document assembly being where I'm in a line of business system and I want to generate a document, contract, a form letter, or whatever, based on the data in my application. Or if I receive a form from the outside world, I want to extract that data and push it into my line of business system. And then finally, and this is the big one, transactional data entry. This is the one that everybody started buying RPA for. The ability to take a complex transaction and be able to disseminate and migrate that information to all of the downstream systems that need to be touched in order to facilitate whatever that transaction represents. So let's take a look at some of these. If I could get control here, I will share my desktop and we'll look at examples of this.
You got control.
All right. Hopefully, there we go. All right. So what we're looking at here is a Windows 10 desktop, and down in the Windows system tray here, we have an attended bot. Attended bot right now, all it's doing is every second, second and a half, depending upon how it's configured, it's looking on my desktop, trying to figure out what is Joe working on now? What is the context within which he's working? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this application here, My CRM. It's a 32-bit Windows application that was developed back in 2005, has no API, no access to source code, but I want to add capabilities to it. How do I do that without breaking open the application? Considering that I can't do it, I really have no other way but through RPA. So when I load the My CRM application, you're going to notice right up here in the title bar, right after the application loads, a button is inserted. This button is not native to the My CRM application. It was inserted by this guy over here. So what happened was the attended bot is watching and it says, okay, I've just determined the context and I can do something for you from there. What is a context? A context is, who am I as the logged in user, Joe LeBay? What application am I in? I'm in My CRM. What screen am I on? I'm on the People tab. What data is on that screen? And what is the state of that data? All of that information is ingested and processed in a blink of an eye to determine, can the bot do anything for me here? And if it can, it puts the button here, and when I drop it, it shows me all the contextual automations that I might want to run from here. So let's take a look at the jump to pattern that we talked about. I'm looking at Oscar Matasox, and now I want to see Oscar's W-2 form, which is not stored in My CRM. It is stored in my document management package. So when I click this button and I say jump to W-2 document, an extraction happens out of the line of business system, a query is formulated, and it is sent to the document management package, in this case, the KnowledgeLake platform, and it brings me back the W-2 form. So there was no switching costs, there was no copying, pasting, no logins or anything like that. It was all done for me by the bot. Now, by the way, the reverse is true as well. Let's say, for example, that I'm starting with Oscar's W-2 form, and now I want to navigate to Oscar's record in my CRM. Well, my CRM has no API. There's no way for me to do that. The only way to do it is for me to, and this is part of our definition, remote control my CRM to get me to Oscar's record. So I'm going to click this button, and what happens is the data that's needed to find Oscar's record is extracted. My CRM is loaded, logged into, we issue a search, and we get to Oscar's record. So the jump to pattern, which is often performed, or I should say almost exclusively by an attended bot, is bidirectional between every single application set on your desktop. Let's take a look at the index or quick copy. Here's an example where I've scanned in a document and I need to supply metadata, and all the data is already here in my CRM application. Why do I have to copy and paste each field? Can I click a button and say quick copy to index panel, which will pull the data out and paste the data into the index panel. Next, we're going to look at the document assembly pattern. And for that, I'm going to go to this tab, and I'm going to go grab some service call data. So let's fetch our next service notice. Now let's say I'm working in a car dealership and I want to send Oscar a letter informing him of a free service offer that he has. Well, normally what I would do is I would go and I'd write an email or I'd write a document and I would copy and paste all of Oscar's information and his vehicle information. But in this case, I'm going to use the document assembly pattern that when I click this and I say create customer letter, it will, via the attended bot, open Microsoft Word. As you could see, it's navigating around my CRM to gather all the data, and now it's typing the information in. Now I'm using an attended bot to do this. However, when it comes to document assembly and forms extraction, quite often that is done using an unattended bot. But you could use either one, doesn't make a difference, but this kind of pattern lends itself to more unattended bots that are done in batch. And by the way, now that this document has been created, not only was it generated, but a copy was emailed to Oscar in the same automation, and a copy was stored in my document management system, which means when I click this button, I can go and I can open that customer letter again via the jump to pattern. So I'm jumping from my line of business system, from the actual offer data to the offer letter, and that's pretty neat. Let's close all this down, and now let's get into the transactional, data entry transactional one. As you can see here, I've got an invoice. I'm going to open this invoice up. And this invoice was scanned, and all kinds of great technology was used to AutoCAD this document and extract the data. And it's great that I've got a picture of it and I've got a record of it stored in my document management system. But the purpose of capturing this is to pay it. It's to facilitate the transaction. So that's what this button here does. When I click this button, it's going to extract all the invoice information and it's going to type it in to my accounting system, which in this case is QuickBooks. So when I click this button, I'm going to say add invoice on my machine. And what it's going to do, an attended bot, again, is going to extract the information from this screen, and then it's going to open QuickBooks, log in, find the purchase order that authorized this purchase, and then type in all the invoice information. And I can do this for as many as I want, keep running it. Notice it's running on my machine. And that's all well and good because this is a pretty short transaction. But let's say I have more than one transaction. Let's say I have 7. Or 700 or 7,000, it doesn't matter. I have some large number. I don't want to open each one, click the button and have it processed. What I'd prefer to do is have a hybrid bot where I can say, take these 7 invoices and go type them in somewhere else. Don't tie up my desktop. So when I click that button, right now what happens is all 7 of those invoices get ingested by the attended bot, and then it frees up my desktop so I can go and do what I want, and it's now passed those transactions to these 4 bots that are sitting here waiting for jobs. So these are dedicated unattended bots. And now that I've sent those 7 invoices over, now they're going to type in 4 at a time. And I'm only showing you 4, but it could be 40, it could be 400, it could be 4,000. That's how it scales. It doesn't make a difference. So right now, all those transactions that I pushed in are being entered simultaneously. And if I get into a busy part of the year and I want to spin up more of them, I can certainly spin up more of them as well. One other thing to note here too is that we talked about those tools that speak the language of the user. If I go into here, I can actually run a recording of one of those jobs that I ran before. So this is the kind of tooling that the user has at their disposal. Any transaction that was executed, they can watch a video of it and they could see the synced log file. And if they want, they could actually even see the specification document that was used to build the automation. So in effect, what we've done here is we've given the user a 360-degree view of every transaction. And that's why it makes it really easy for folks to diagnose problems. And this is one of the reasons why a lot of companies, even though QuickBooks does have an API, opt to do it this way. So let me show you the last demo and we're all set here. This is document acquisition, and the reason why I saved it for last is because I only have a video of it, but I'll narrate it quickly. We have a customer called ECI Defense Group. They are in the business of gathering data from the Department of Defense and about goods and services that they want to procure, and they turn around and they make this information available to their subscribers. And so what they did was they had a team of 6 analysts that would do nothing but just go to these websites all day long, looking for solicitations, determining if it's a new solicitation, if it's a duplicate, if it's an update. As you can imagine, tedious, mind-numbing work, highly prone to error. Well, they implemented RPA, and this is what the bots now do. And I'm going to show you one example with a site called BidLink. What happens is the bot wakes up, it logs into the website, and then what it does is it goes and it grabs all the queries that the ECI folks have set up for their customers. It grabs all the queries and then it starts to execute them one at a time, looking for solicitations for each one. So you're going to see here, it's going to go through 3 queries. It's not going to find any solicitations. On the 4th one, it finds it, but it goes and it checks and it says solicitation 66R3 on August 28th. We've already seen that one. This is a duplicate, so disregard it and move on. Then it runs the 5th one, and this time it's going to find a new solicitation, and it's going to do a couple of things. First, it's going to download it. What's interesting is the PDF format that BidLink stores is not compatible with the PDF format that ECI stores in its document management system. So after we download it, we then open it in Adobe Acrobat and convert it to a format that their internal system, which I believe is FileBound, can actually support. So just think of all the work we've seen. We've taken 5 or 6 analysts and have taken them out of the business of doing this monotonous work, freed them up to go and serve customers and have the bots do this work. And not only has it reduced all of the time that they've had to put in, it does it more accurately, and they can run these jobs a bunch of times a day. So they're actually issuing hundreds, if not thousands of queries a day to better serve their customers. And with that, I will turn it back over to David.
Awesome job. Thank you, Joe. That was great. Sure. Jim, I'm going to make you the presenter again. We'll finish up the slides. I want to acknowledge that we're running long here. Apologize for that, and some people, have to go. But one of the questions that was asked is, will we send out the recording? And we will, as always, send out the recording in the presentation. So, okay, so we're going to do a quick poll for those who are left to see if anybody wants to engage with us past the webinar. And I thought about the slide that we had about the follow-up sessions for the workflows that Jim showed, and we should have had an option on there for the RPA piece as well. So if you're interested in a follow-up session with Joe and the RPA component, just pick schedule a demo here. So I'm gonna go ahead and launch this. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it, but if you're interested in some kind of a follow-up, if you've got a project you're just not sure how to start, whether maybe it's, do I do workflow or RPA, we can do some brainstorming. We can schedule a demo beyond what we saw today, and this would be specific to your organization. Put together an estimate for a project or proof of concept, and we do a lot of RFPs. So probably some 75% of our business comes from RFPs. So I have volumes of RFPs that we could share if you're approaching doing an RFP. So give this about 5 more seconds, and I'm not going to show this one because this is just for our internal information. 3, 2, 1, and that is closed. Jim, next slide, please. In the deck, there's a number of links that we'll share with you. I mentioned that we have another webinar later this month that's on advanced content services and document capture that will again feature KnowledgeLake and their capture platform, and you all will get an email about that so you can register. And on that particular webinar, I'll talk about the series we're going to start for next year. Go ahead, Jim, next slide, please. I think which is the final slide. And we don't have a lot of questions today. We usually have tons of questions. So if you, the only question I got was, will we be sharing the recordings? I've answered that. There were a few others that I honestly didn't understand, a little off topic, and the person has left already. So if you have any questions, we can hang out for about 10 minutes. If you don't, then we'll close out for the day, and we appreciate you joining. Again, I acknowledge that we ran long, and that's not by design. And in the new year, we're going to do a better job with that. I know we've been rushing these because we're putting too much content in. So give it about 30 seconds. Jim or Joe, was there anything else you wanted to add, or did you have a question for each other or me while we wait and see if anyone else has a question?
I'm just looking forward to the deep dive sessions. I want to add some more goodness to one of those processes. So doing it together with a collection of people that just watched that demo would be fun.
Yeah, about, I think it was 41% of the audience, which was 80 some odd people, voted, and many of them voted for multiple sessions. So we should have a nice little audience for that. If somebody, didn't vote and wants to see a session on one of the workflows or RPA, then please send us an email. Maybe we've got my email address on the screen there, so you can just email me and I'll get you connected. Okay, so we do have a question now. Somebody thanked us, which is nice. Thank you for joining. Also, how difficult is it to automate processes using Power Automate on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being easy, 10 being difficult? So I guess that's for you, Jim. Jim, are you on mute?
Yeah. So It really depends on how complex, how easy it is to implement a flow in Power Automate depends on how complex the process is. So if it's when I receive an email from this person or with this in the subject line or whatever, then add it as an item to a SharePoint list. That's pretty simple. There's a built-in template that's already set up to do that, and all you have to do is tell it which kind of email to look for and what SharePoint list to put it in. So that one would be easy. Just to take an example of the flow, one of the flows that we saw today was the weekly status report generation. And that flow, I imagine we put maybe 8 hours into it over the course of its life. It's much different now than it was the first time we created it. So it's a really difficult question to answer. If you've never done any similar kind of work in any similar kind of tools in any way, then anything might be a 10 in terms of difficulty. Where do I even go? Well, you start from start with the design, what it is you're trying to accomplish, and what are the steps involved, and who are the players, and get your design done first. That's probably going to be the most difficult part. And then implementing it is just finding the right person to do it for you sometimes. I can keep talking, but I think that's probably enough.
Now, it really, I think you'll when people ask me, well, what's it going to take to do, this? And when it's something as broad as use Power Automate to implement a workflow, my answer is almost always depends on requirements. So I think that's kind of what Jim touched on, but you can do very simple things very quickly. You saw the canvas, but then, there's certain parts that we pulled in a third-party product to generate a document, or we're doing some posting in Teams and things like that. So if you stay within just a kind of fairly straightforward workflow and you're not integrating to other systems or generating documents or anything like that, then I think that, it's something, the design is no code, right? It's something that I don't think it's an end user typically. I think it's, in my experience, more of somebody with some, fairly good analytical skills who maybe isn't a programmer, but is thinks that way, right? Thinks about processes, thinks about, like, one of the things Jim pointed to is we are waiting for a change. I believe is on the, I think it's on the work order. I'm not sure. I'm sorry, the change request, but we're waiting for a change.
Meeting curation.
To meeting curation, and then we're making changes in the workflow. So you could potentially create a kind of an infinite loop there if you're not careful. In programming, we call that recursion. It's like a program that calls itself, and you have to always account for it, that those calls coming back to you, so don't create an infinite loop. So if you're doing things that are a little more complex, then certainly the skill level goes up. So some people have reported that they're just waiting to view Joe's screen. So Jim, I guess you could reshare, but we're about to wrap up. All that's on the screen right now, if you're not seeing it, is just a list of reasons why you could reach out to us, to brainstorm, to get a proof of concept or an estimate, things like that. Jim just reshared. If there's anything we can do to help you, just email me. It's david@ShareSquared.com. So ShareSquared, like share to the power of 2, ShareSquared.com, and I'll direct the inquiry to whoever the appropriate person is. So we don't have any other questions. Joe, did you have any parting comments, or shall we wrap?
Nope, I think everything was well presented, and thanks for having me today.
Yeah, thank you. That was great. Okay, we're going to close out. Thank you all for the few people who are still hanging on. We hope to see you at the next webinar later this month. You'll get an email about that, and you'll also get the recording and presentation. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and be safe. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.